Federal Executive Council approves funds for execution of critical road projects in Nigeria.
Independent investigative panel on alleged human rights violations by the defunct SARS begins sitting in Abuja.
The various ongoing panels of investigation strengthens government resolve to deal with cases of human rights violations as stipulated under the Constitution.
Nigerian military high command restates commitment to finally dislodge Boko Haram insurgents and other criminals in Nigeria.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall continue our conversation on the U.S. presidential election 2020.
The 2020 United States presidential election has continued to generate comments and analysis by key players in world politics.
Now, the election, which featured, among others, two frontrunners, that is the Republican candidate who is incumbent President Donald Trump and the Democratic Party candidate, former Vice President Joe Biden, has deeply divided Americans. And as analysts are saying, this is an unprecedented level of polarization in the country's election history.
The election is so tight between the two major contenders with allegation of electoral fraud by the incumbent president. In his words, President Trump said, and I quote, "This is a fraud to American public."
Well, both President Donald Trump and Joe Biden require 270 electoral votes to win the presidential election. At the moment, the Democratic candidate, that's Joe Biden, is more hopeful of winning the election as he's leading in the Electoral College vote count with a reasonable margin.
And guests on Good Morning Nigeria who analyzed the election described it as an interesting process reflecting the true representation of the people's feeling in the country, which they said contains a lot of lessons to learn from.
Now, the guests also indicated that there are cleavages, of course, in America, such that our democracy didn't cater for such differences, including, of course, bridging the gap between the rich and the poor, which is, in their view, tends to promote capitalism and racism as well as exclusivism in the country's 200-year democratic journey.
Well, Kingsley, whoever wins the presidential election, the guest said, might not make any much difference in terms of foreign policy, but the only thing that is likely to change is the technique in diplomacy.
So, what is the implication, ultimately, of the outcome of the U.S. presidential election for the rest of the world? In other words, why should the rest of the world be interested in who becomes the president of the United States? What lessons has Nigeria got to learn from the process that we are seeing unfolding still in the U.S.? And how would the winner of the election affect global institutions, treaties, and alliances such as the World Health Organization, global security, as well as humanitarian issues? These are some of the talking points as we continue our conversation today on the outcome of the U.S. presidential election 2020. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and I'm Kingsley Osadolo. Said welcome to this edition of the program.
And I am Yusuf Nodabo Suman, also welcoming you to Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA.
And the good news, of course, is that some Nigerian Americans have won their elections into the U.S. House of Representatives. Now, they include Esther Agbaje and Oye Owolewa.
Chatting news, really, Kingsley. As usual, we have our complimentary segments too, including newspaper review, business news, and others. Let's now join Abdul Malik Adiu for the morning news highlights. Good morning, Abdul Malik.
Good morning, Nadabo, and good morning, Kingsley. It's good to have you join us on the morning news. Now, infrastructure takes pride of place as the Federal Executive Council has approved more than 87 billion naira for the construction, rehabilitation, and completion of critical road projects in parts of the country. This is part of the effort at sustaining the nation's trajectory towards addressing infrastructure deficit for enhanced socio-economic development.
Within phase 2 of the Federal Capital City, and is going to serve adjoining districts of Mabushi, Kado, Katampe, and Jahi. And it will also generally enhance overall decongestion of traffic in phases 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the Federal Capital City.
Now, ministers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria from the Southwest region are asking the federal government to undertake a thorough investigation into the alleged shooting at the Lekki Toll Plaza with a view to bringing perpetrators to justice. They also want government to intensify efforts towards restoring confidence in the Nigerian police as well as supporting Lagos State to review damaged facilities. They were part of the recommendation. This were part of the recommendations the minister submitted to the Federal Executive Council.
Stations were lost, commercial undertakings, especially malls in Lekki and many other parts of Sule were damaged. Some schools were also damaged. To also urge the federal government to consider short to medium-term assistance to small and medium businesses who were affected by the looting and arson.
Now, the independent investigative panel on the alleged human rights violations by the defunct SARS and other units of the Nigerian police has so far received more than 150 complaints across FCT and the 6 geopolitical zones. And the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, Tony Ojukwu, made this known at the inaugural sitting of the panel in Abuja.
Furthermore, the setting aside of victims' compensation fund in each state for the settlement of any awards of compensation by the various ongoing panels of investigation strengthens government resolve to deal with cases of human rights violations as stipulated under the Constitution.
We will deliver on this monumental task before us.
The Nigerian Military High Command has expressed determination to finally dislodge Boko Haram insurgents and ISWAP criminals from their enclaves following the troops' neutralization of 75 members of the insurgents groups and recovery of a large number of arms and ammunition in various operations conducted between 28 September and 31st October 2020. Acting Director Defense Media Operation, Brigadier General Bernard, disclosed this while briefing newsmen at the Nigerian Army Super Camp 1, Ngamdu.
These elements have been neutralized as large number of their equipment were captured, while some were equally destroyed in the process. In this regard, a total of 75 Boko Haram Islamic State of West African province terrorists were neutralized within this period.
In liberal democracies, a budget process involves division of labor within the ambit of separation of powers. Now, the activities at the National Assembly in the last 2 weeks captured this constitutional process. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission, the Nigerian Navy, and the Federal Road Safety Commission were at the National Assembly to provide justification for their 2021 budget.
Especially senior lawyer must be here to maintain the integrity and honor and nobility of the legal profession.
Now, the third tier of government is the one closest to the people at the grassroots, but this arm of government is yet to attain financial independence as it is still tied to the apron of the chief executives at the state level. Now, efforts of government at the center to correct this abnormality was highlighted when the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission appeared before House Committee on Finance and Budget Defense.
It's a problem. Overcrowding as a result of large number of awaiting trial persons is still a very, very big challenge.
We realized that we needed to build up our the capital side of our budget vis-a-vis the recurrent, because it is only when we have that capital reserve that we can carry out the necessary projects either for youth.
The Nigerian Center for Disease Control (NCDC) has announced 155 new cases of COVID-19 in the country. In the statistics released by the center, Lagos State has the highest number of the new cases with 85, followed by FCT with 23, while Ondo State came third with 18. Others are Ogun State with 8, Kaduna, Oyo and Taraba State with 5 each. Now Kano has 3, Rivers 2, while Bauchi has 1 new case. So far, Nigeria has 63,328 confirmed cases of COVID-19, out of which 59,675 have been discharged, while 1,155 died of the virus. And that concludes the morning news highlight. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Nadabo and Kingsley after this break.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you from the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, federal government concludes plan to sell power plant as financial expert offers tips on how to rebuild after destruction that trailed NSAS protests. Let's now join Kule Ade for details on business news.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo will oversee the signing of agreements to conclude the sale of the 105 billion naira Afam power plant, a transaction viewed as needed support for the revenue challenge facing the country. Director General of the Bureau for Public Enterprises, Alex Oko, disclosed this in Abuja, adding that the sale is timely, especially with fresh concerns over a new wave of COVID-19 infections, coupled with disruptions to the Nigerian economy from recent NSAS protests and a looming recession.
Basically to help generate revenues to support the fiscal plan for the year. And incidentally, we are going to be doing the signing ceremony for the sale of Afam power plant to the preferred bidder. That alone will fetch the federal government a total sum of 105 billion naira.
In another development, a tax expert, Michael Tolobashi, has implored the federal government to focus on fixing the infrastructure damaged by hoodlums in the aftermath of the NSAS protests.
Let businesses resume and start running. Most of the taxes in Nigeria are based on sales and profit. When businesses don't sell, you can get value-added tax. When businesses don't make profit, you can get company income tax. So, the government must ensure that businesses are running and are comfortably secured.
And next are the details of how tradings went on Wednesday, November 4, 2020 on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Many thanks, Kunle, for the business package. Coming up next is Newspaper Review.
Bayo Atebi is already here with us for the review of the paper. So welcome, Bayo.
Thank you. So good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Right, Bayo, good to see you. Okay, so Bayo, tell us what's new.
Well, let's start with the U.S. election, which everybody around the world is looking up to. The result of the election is said to have seen the largest turnout in 120 years, and so far it polled about 66.9% of the 225 million voters. By way of popular votes, the Democratic Party Joe Biden is leading, having polled about 50.3% votes so far. Republican President Trump polled 48.1%. Both candidates have won in 23 states. However, Joe Biden is apparently in a very narrow lead. On the Electoral College, 270 votes are required to occupy the White House. Candidate Joe Biden, as at the last count, has registered 253 votes. He's expected to clinch 6 other votes from Nevada, which will make him reach the magic number 270.
candidate Donald Trump has 213 votes and is requiring 57 votes to reach the magic number. Already President Trump has headed to the federal court to halt the counting, especially in Pennsylvania, which he says he is ready to follow up to the Supreme Court level. In the state, in Pennsylvania, the state can admit mail votes that have the post date by the date of election. So up till Friday, they are available by that state law to admit votes, but he is asking for those votes there to be counted. Meanwhile, protesters have gathered at Arizona and they are protesting in front of the election house, and they are having posters saying, "We want Trump," and they are chanting, "Count the votes." Also in Oregon, protesters are protesting and they are saying, "We want Trump out." Meanwhile, two Nigerians have succeeded in the Nigerian Americans who contested have succeeded in their election. They won their seats. In another development, in North Dakota, a man who was registered to contest the election but unfortunately died on the 19th of last month, COVID-19, also strangely won election. So that is the update as far as the U.S. presidential election is concerned. Okay, and it's kept the whole world in a breathtaking, and everybody is watching. It has also busted some myths. It is often said in America that whoever occupies the White House will win Ohio and Florida. The results on Ohio and Florida has all been declared, but still, the election is too close to call.
Too much too close to call, really. Before we get down to other issues in the newspaper, let me go through the Sun here and then see what's happening here. And then on the Daily Sun, we have at the top, we can't afford 110 billion naira for revitalization of universities, federal government tells ASU. The lead story is about the ICPC now, which opens inquiry into NSAS protest crimes with writers of NBA, CDHR, Ozir Khome, Arogundade, Alaigbo, and others react. Others rather act now and avert disaster, ACJMC advises Buhari. Lekki tollgate shooting, Southwest ministers demand probe of military role, rather than the role of the military, that's going to be on page 6. And Dangote's fertilizer plant ready December, refinery next year, page 6 too. 2 Nigerians win U.S. State Assembly seats on page 9. And Oyibo, we won't abandon Igbo in Rivers or Hanese. Youth leaders demand prosecution of soldiers. At the bottom page, we have Mago accuses Salami panel of bias. That's going to be on page 8 on the Daily Sun. And then you have stories on business on page 2. There is a story also, as usual, you must expect, because that's the trending news now. Biden leads in tight U.S. presidential election. Counting of votes continues with bold pictures of the 2 contenders, Donald Trump and Democratic Joe Biden. Do you have much more there on the U.S. election?
No, not much, but just to add to the story you read, actually, the story about the ministers of the Southwest making recommendations to the Federal Executive Council, it was based on the directive of the President that ministers should visit their states, particularly at the end of the NSAT process, which occasionally mayhem in several parts of the country. So it is after the visit that the ministers said, because Lagos was the nucleus, especially the epicenter of the violence, they made recommendations to the Federal Executive Council. And some of what they recommended is investigation into what happened at Lekki Tollgate. They also asked for involvement of all those that were involved in the carnage, especially across Lagos and all the other states, to be brought to justice. They call on the federal government to assist Lagos state government in restoring public facilities destroyed during the NSAS. They also emphasize, well, this is very important, the mobilization by critical organs of government, especially educational institutions, to focus on ethical reorientation of family values in school curricula. And for the orientation agencies, they said they should be focused on etiquette, critical thinking, empathy, civic duty, and human rights. These are, they think, are the sociological vacuum that enhance the violence that followed the NSAS. However, the investigative panel appointed to look by the National Human Rights Commission to look into it yesterday was inaugurated, and the Attorney General of the Federation, who was represented by the Solicitor General, gave assurance that everybody that is indicted will be brought to justice. And in fact, he indicated that very soon there will be a meeting between the Attorney General of the Federation and the Attorneys General of the other states to cut a pathway how this prosecution, these people, will be brought to justice.
Well, I think that the story on the harsh NSAS protests and matters arising, one of the headlines we don't have there on the front page of the Daily Sun is what has also happened in Lagos. The Lagos State Governor is reported to have signed an executive order on the rebuilding of Lagos. That's to say, this establishment of a trust fund to rebuild Lagos out of the ashes of the mayhem unleashed by hoodlums who hijacked the NSAS protest. This is very significant. The governor says that, look, yes, a bill will be sent to the State House of Assembly, but we do know that the legislative process can be tedious sometimes if there is due diligence, and that there are already requests for assistance by both local and global donors to say, look, how can we help in rebuilding Lagos? So the governor has signed the executive order to accommodate such contributions, and I think an 8-man committee has also been set up. It's a huge task that Lagos faces, not just for public infrastructure, but more also for the private businesses. And that's one way to get that megalopolis back on its feet and running again. I mean, you saw what happened to the iconic Igboshire High Court,
yes,
one of the oldest court buildings in the country.
Yes. Sadly.
Razed, and records destroyed beyond recognition. And as I've indicated, one of the key things to do is to forensically identify a couple of the faces in those videos and let them realize that what they were doing wasn't funny.
Yes.
To go out, and set fire to public buildings, even private buildings.
In fact,
there must be consequences.
He was wearing a gown and a wig, and he was walking majestically from the court premises.
That's desecration of the Temple of Justice.
Yes.
And that also implies to almost every aspect of this NSAS protest, given the fact that so many people were beaten, so many, houses, infrastructure were braced down, and a lot of things like that. There are so many faces you can see that can, be easily traced and be gotten and prosecuted. Even during the hoodlums, or the foodlums, I would say, the hoodlums protest in other states, you find people coming out to talk about this to themselves and then send it on the social media. I mean, it's easy for the police to deal with that, I think.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. That's right.
Another story here, I think, that drew my attention is the federal government ASU issue on the Daily Sun, which says we can't afford 110 billion naira for the revitalization of universities, federal government tells ASU. I mean, this calls for worry, really, talking about the length of the strike and how it's going and the seeming bleak or gloom, horizon on this issue. When we connect this to the NSAS thing, somebody was saying that, of course, the NSAS thing got some leeway and was able to be executed successfully because of the,
students who were at home,
and then there was nothing much doing by them, and it seems as if it's a deadlock.
Well, the ASU thing is very sad in the sense that they happen on agreement made since 2009, renewed in 2013. About 2 weeks ago, federal government was offering about 20 billion, and they said that is not sufficient enough. They are demanding 110 billion. Put that together, that is the budget of some states. And to carve that out will go a long way in undermining an economy that is already struggling for internal revenue and is actually resorting to seeking loans to carry out capital projects. I would think that if they are able to overcome the impasse about IPs and UTAs, whatever federal government agrees to pay should be paid instrumentally across the years. To demand that it should be paid in bulk at the time, it means that it is appearing as if they are going to the meeting, talking at each other, but not listening to each other.
maybe what the proposal probably we haven't heard yet is that they should ask the federal government to go and borrow so that they can pay whatever is outstanding, assuming that is a viable option. But seriously, look, this is the amount you say that the federal government is owing you. Do universities not generate their own internal revenues? How much do universities generate as what we call IGRO generally? A number of them have business outfits. They have consultancy outfits, even though some of them reduce themselves to producing pure water and bottled water. Those are some of the realistic things we must be talking about. I mean, that's how much research is emerging from the university. Yes. What are the patents that have been registered from the institutions? On Good Morning Nigeria, I recall we had Dr. Umar Bindri, who used to be at NOTAP. That's the National Office for Technology Acquisition and Patents. Well, how many patents are registered from our institutions?
From their research findings.
From their research findings. So what is the IGRO that we also generate? Sometimes we don't reduce this thing to say like it's like a line ministry. You wait for your salaries to be paid you at the end of every month and so on and so forth. We must also begin to ask these questions. How much endowments are the universities also attracting? How do you scout for benefactors who will endow chairs in the institutions, who will fund research in the institutions? You can't be coming to the federal government every time or going to the state government. Is that the way universities are run elsewhere? That sometimes when we are making comparisons, sometimes some of these things we have to be realistic about it and ask ourselves. The other issue, of course, relates to whether federal government is also owing lecturers in state universities.
State universities, yes.
But the blackmail cannot continue for so long a time. We know that university lecturers, on account of the strikes that they embarked on in years past, they have had a new deal. They have no question about that. I mean, the retirement age has been revised. Professors now retire at age 70. You have also seen funding. You have seen the resources usually expended by TED Fund, either for research, publishing, or further training and retraining.
Investment by Central Bank.
Central Bank is also doing. Central Bank is also doing its own selected infrastructure. But these are some of the things that we should be talking about. The Senate President said this some weeks ago. Said, "Look, gentlemen, 2009 looks some way back. You have to be realistic as to what you are asking for." They have economists amongst them. So look, what is the nation's financial standing at the moment? What is the nation's financial standing next year?
I think that essentially all these issues have been troubled. All the time they talk, normally we don't hear some of these things being raised, but I believe they are being put across, at least on the table for them to discuss. You know, newspapers sometimes are just what they are. They just bring out the stories they really want to sell with, and there they go. Some of these nitty-gritties may be part of it, but can we have the editorial, please, Kingsley?
Well, that's fine, but yeah. It may not be fair to say that newspapers just bring out what they want to say. I have a newspaper background. They ASU people. We have had ASU president on Good Morning Nigeria talk about these issues. We have also had other officials also talk about these issues. But it's just the continuing, all of this started with IPPIs.
Yes.
All right, we'll take the editorial, which is alarming rise in cancer cases. That's on page 16. This says the Minister of Health, Osage Anere, has drawn attention to the rising cases of cancer in the country, which will require a comprehensive strategy to stem. The editorial adds that they welcome the evolution of the strategy as enunciated by the minister, which involves improved awareness creation, risk communication to reduce cancer-causing agents, as well as routine medical checks. To this must be added close collaboration with countries and global cancer research institutions for their assistance in the effort to tackle the rising incidence of the disease in Nigeria.
I agree with the perspective of the editorial entirely, because those are the basic preventive methods. But on the curative level, I'm encouraged that just only last week, a very effective cancer equipment was launched at the National Hospital here. We should have such at several locations. One is not enough. I remember some 2008 or thereabout, I had a situation to be very close to a cancer patient. And when you go for MRI and scanning, you have to queue several days. And sometimes they have to wait for the reagent to be used in the machine, which was imported from South Africa. So those are the nitty-gritties. And if you go back several years, there was a situation whereby federal government designated some federal teaching hospitals as centers for specific ailments. And by emphasizing and providing the facility for those areas, we'll be able to have specialty for those hospitals in several locations in the country. We need not to talk about the one that is under our nose here. Along the airport route, you have an international cancer center. You have a very huge structure sitting there. Where are the equipment? Where are the facilities? And we all recall that there was a launch that was during the tenure of President Umar Musa Yar'Adua, may Allah rest his soul. Funds were launched for that hospital. What has become of it? These are the challenges that we need to...
Well, these are great challenges, really. Well, thank you so much, Bayo, for coming this morning. We hope you come again tomorrow as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We shall now take a break. We'll be back in a moment with more on this program.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, as a prompt for the continuation of our conversation on the U.S. presidential election 2020, let's listen into these excerpts from what we had yesterday with our guest. Here is our correspondent, Aisha Ubali.
The last 4 years has seen the disruption of multilateralism as a cornerstone of global diplomacy and interaction between and among nations. Donald Trump came and tore into pieces several set constructs in global diplomacy that have maintained relative stability in the international community and also retain consensus on the way the world should move. On climate change, he pulled out of the global climate change structure. He pulled America out of the World Health Organization. He threatened to pull them out of the Human Rights Council, or he did so. And he disrupted the alliances and relationships that have been built over many years with Europe and other NATO members, with the ASEAN countries.
We are not going to do away, whether Trump or anybody, multilateral diplomacy will continue to exist for years to come.
The extent of their mentality, the extent of their attitudinal disposition. If, for instance, if any normal human being will disregard, for instance, how the foreign policy and relations with the implications for the partners, of the United States, if they can consciously close their eyes not to recognize what Donald Trump has been doing in the past 4 years, only to now say that they will vote in some battleground states or toss-up states or swing states for that president, then that simply means that something is wrong with the thinking of the voter.
America has shown a very bad example. It has shown it from the fact that the man who has been there for the past 4 years has really put everything on his head. Even the projections of elections, the pundits have failed in 2016.
The people that you expect to go out there and vote have been misled. They've been given some false information to think otherwise. This is the reality on ground.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you from the Nigerian Television Authority. Now we get down to business and talk about the U.S. presidential elections, part 2, I must say, because we spoke about it yesterday. And now we have guests here with us in Abuja and also through Zoom. Let's start the introduction from here with Ambassador Usman Seriki, who is a former deputy representative of Nigeria to the United Nations and currently directing staff, National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPS, Kuru, Jos. Glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, Ambassador Saki, thank you very much. You were with us yesterday. We've had to wake you up again this morning to be part of this conversation. The two Zoom connections that my colleague Nadabo referred to earlier, also Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, was Nigeria's summer ambassador to Ethiopia, and also a former member of the House of Representatives, a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria. Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, delighted to have you with us on the program.
Very much for having me.
Okay, and then also joining us via Zoom from Evanston, Illinois in the U.S. is Abdul Basit Kasim. He's a doctoral candidate at Rice University and also a visiting doctoral fellow at Northwestern University in Illinois. Kasim, delighted to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
All right, so as the saying goes in Nigeria, you are on the ground there in the U.S. Some of the developments we've picked up, but at close quarters, what is happening? By yesterday, people thought that the results would all have been out and a winner known, but still, it's a very tight race. The nation is on knife edge, we understand, a cliffhanger outcome. What else is new?
Thank you so much for having me. This particular election, I think it's actually one of the most competitive election in the recent history of U.S. election. There's so many things at stake for this particular election, for both parties, both Republican and the Democrats. I mean, Americans are paying close attention to this election. The regional allies of the US are also paying close attention because there's so many issues that the result of this election would actually determine. Issues around healthcare, issues around economy, the economy of the US, as well as the role of US in global economy. Then the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic is also another issue that most people are speaking about with respect to this election. Then the issue of criminal and racial justice in America, the issue of immigration, the issue of climate change, the issue of American foreign policy. These are some of the issues that is actually shaping people's attention to this election. But what we've seen so far on the ground, we've actually seen that there's a lot of tension. We've seen some candidates, we've seen particularly Donald Trump, he claimed, he came out to pronounce early victory for some of the states that are yet to count their votes. So states like Pennsylvania, state like Georgia, state like North Carolina, state like Nevada, states like Arizona as well. These are competitive states. They are swing states that both parties are competing for. They're competing to win in this state. Now, what happened was Donald Trump actually came out to declare early victory, and then he also came out to complain about voter suppression and voters fraud. So Donald Trump actually casted doubt and suspicion to the entire electoral process, because the entire country is already at that point of the entire country is already at that brink of there's a lot of tension in the country. But then Donald Trump also inflamed the tension by going out there to claim early victory. But on the part of Biden as well, he has been tempted to also claim early victory, but he has been careful in his rhetoric. He has emphasized to the American public as well as the global audience that every vote must count, that every vote must count, that they have to wait to count every vote before anybody can actually declare victory. So this is basically what is happening on the ground for now.
Well, I was just trying to ask you to shed more light on this. We just want to lay the background for this discussion and then see what's happening. Every minute there are minute by minute, developments in the United States about the election. And that means that a lot is being done at the moment for, people to get first-hand information about developments pertaining to the United States presidential election. At the moment, it's about 7:45 here in Nigeria. People are yearning. Exactly what is it? Because there are informations and there are projection that results may be out much earlier than now, but there are still going to be some doubts as regards this because it may reach tomorrow. At the moment, what's the stage? What are we really facing at the moment in the United States?
So there are so many reasons. There's different reasons why this election or the announcement of results for this election is actually taking longer time than other election. Part of the reason is because of the coronavirus and the COVID-19 situation. So America actually employed the mail-in absentee voting method, as well as early voting, as well as voting on the election day. So there were actually three patterns that people employed for voting. There were those who voted in absentia by mail. There were those who did early voting in person, and then there were those who voted on the day of the election. So the counting of the votes, because compared to other elections, this particular election actually had large turnout. People came out to vote. So the numbers of people that have actually casted their votes is it's quite overwhelming. So each state, especially the states where both candidates are expecting to win. I mean, there are some states that are actually considered swing states. The officials in the state are making sure that every vote actually counts. So some media agency in America, they are actually very wary and careful of declaring a particular candidate as a potential winner in certain states, because they want all the votes to be counted. So, for example, in the case of Georgia is actually it has predominantly been a red state, a Republican state. But then what we are seeing on the ground for now, Donald Trump is about 49.7%, and Biden is about 49.1%. It's just 0.6% difference. And then we are still having, I mean, according to what the officials in Georgia said, they're still having about 200,000 votes to count. In the case of Nevada, which is also a state where both candidates it's also considered a swing state. The state of Nevada, the officials in the state of Nevada, they actually paused the counting of votes and they postponed it till tomorrow, till the morning. So by 10 a.m., the state of Nevada will start the counting process. Then in the case of Pennsylvania has actually faced a lot of issues because President Donald Trump has actually filed for different lawsuits in Pennsylvania, because at first, the counting of votes was in his favor. Now, what we've seen is that in states where the counting of votes was actually in the favor of President Trump, he called for the cessation of counting of votes. But in states where he felt he has better advantage, he actually said that they must keep counting. So, for example, in Pennsylvania, they've actually filed lawsuits for them to stop counting the votes. And the reason for that was because the state of Pennsylvania actually extended their counting of votes for 3 days. They gave 3 days extension. And some of the Republican party officials are arguing that the counting of votes should be done on the election day. But then the state official, Pennsylvania, they are actually saying that it's impossible for them to finish counting all the election results on the election day because they have backlog of mail-in votes, they have backlog of people who actually have voted early, and all of those votes must actually count. So what we are seeing in this place, we are seeing concern about electoral security. We are also seeing concern of voter suppression and an attempt to disenfranchise some people, and that is why some of the Democrats, especially, they are arguing that all vote must count, and they are wary of declaring early victory. But in the case of Republican Donald Trump, he declared early victory, but then most importantly, I think to wrap this up, most importantly, we've also seen the role of technology, especially social media, in this election. So if you for those who are following the Twitter handle of President Donald Trump, he has actually been pouring out a lot of conspiracy about this election. He has been casting doubt to the entire electoral process. But then the Twitter as an organization has actually been for checking some of the tweets of Donald Trump, and they've also been flagging some of it which they believe are not accurate. So there's a lot happening at the moment. But I think by Friday, I think we should know exactly we should know exactly what people are having now is just guesses, and it's too early to actually make some of those guesses. But I guess by Friday, the entire country and even the world, we have a clearer picture of what exactly is the result of the American election.
All right. Thank you very much, Kasim, for that update. We will return to you in the course of the conversation. I just want to bring in Ambassador Usman Sarki again. Yesterday, while we were in the studios, the update in terms of the electoral college votes secured by the two leading candidates, we had a minimum of 200 each. But of course, we have seen a climb up already in terms of the numbers that each of them has secured. That's to say, President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden, with former Vice President Joe Biden ahead. We don't want to give exact numbers now because some are returning 264, others are returning 253. But while we were also in the studios yesterday, our producer, of course, advised us that Trump had already declared the election a fraud, and at the same time proclaimed himself winner of the election. By this morning, we are hearing that some Trump supporters in Arizona and Michigan are saying, stop the count. Elsewhere, others are saying, count the votes. Is this a recipe for the breakdown that might just occur in the event that it is not properly managed, especially by the incumbent President Donald Trump?
Yes. Thank you very much. Well, from the conversation, our discussions yesterday, we stressed the polarization of America because of the Trump factor, his character and his nature, and how he drove the governance and politics of that country. And what we are seeing today is that polarization coming to the surface in terms of discontents, in terms of lack of moderation, in accepting fait accompli or the emergence of the results that we are seeing. And in a democracy, actually, there are some fatalities that will occur if intolerance is shown, particularly in terms of either clinging to office or the opposition trying to claim victory by force. Then disequilibrium comes in, disturbances happen, and then you will find public disgruntlement coming to the surface. The Trump constituency all along had not hidden its disdain for the electoral process. It deems it as its right to control the government. This is our moment, this is our president, he must be there. And I think it's that philosophy, that sentiment coming to the fore. We remember reports of how the largely white constituency is organizing a resistance. Some are even going as far as saying they will organize armed resistance if Trump does not win. So what we are seeing here is people going to the trenches, mostly on the side of Trump. But Joe Biden, being a statesman, a gentleman, a considerate person, has said he is not going to declare winning. He will allow the process to the end. So vote tallies, leaving the establishment, that is the electoral process, to take its course. And that is what the whole world was expecting, that America, being the progenitor of this type of democracy, should actually respect and establish. So what we are saying is the polarization coming to the fore, discontents, intolerance, and others manifesting themselves. And I think, in the long run, this will be the doom of democracy. This laissez-faire attitude where the rules are being relaxed or extended to the breaking point, and where the established order of things are disturbed by partisanship, by militant approach to politics, and even extremist positions. So populism and the disdain for laid out rules and regulations will ultimately undermine democracy, not only in America, but in other parts of the world, if care is not taken.
Oh, well, thank you, Ambassador Sarki. Let's join Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, former Nigerian ambassador to Ethiopia and former member House of Representatives. Ambassador Sarki laid the background for the polarization there in the United States. And of course, the two presidents and the two camps, Republicans and the Democrats, have spoken about the election themselves, given the fact that both sides are really trading cautiously, albeit the fact that Trump has already put forward a case that he may go to court, and Biden, as Sarki said, a statesman, says, and I quote, when the count is finished, he says, we believe we will be the winners. I've given an American, or I will give you an American president, and of course, the president itself is not a partisan institution. On the other side, you know, campaigner for, for Trump says, by the end of this week, it will be clear to the entire nation that Trump and the Vice President Pence will be elected for another 4 years. Now, there sounds to be some optimism on the side of Trump, and of course, some statesmanship statement here from the, Biden camp. What do you make out of these two camps in relation to the waiting being undertaken now in the United States as the ballots have been counted?
Well, thank you very much. I think the point you try to make, and thank you to the rest of the panelists. Thank you, Mr. Kazim. Thank you, Ambassador Sarki. And good morning from wherever you are. The important thing I hear from the conversations that have been going on is this is a contest for power. It is a democratic system, but at the end of it, it's also a contest for power. And the positionality of each of the candidates is also a function of the strategy which they are both engaging with in order to try and access power. Trump has always tried to give the impression that this is something which he's rightfully deserving of. On the other hand, Biden put his entire campaign rhetorics around the fact that he is recovering what is left of democracy. So this is at the roots of the very essence of what they have put out there. There is a lot of thought, like Ambassador Sarki said, about the survival of democracy and what varieties of democracy we're going to see going forward, and the role of popularism in the midst of it. These contentions are ideological, and they are very deeply ideological. Whatever Trump represents and whatever putting America first represents, whether it is in terms of his racist inclinations or in terms of his pro-white inclinations or whatever inclinations we are seeing, are all at the root of what we are contending here with. So ultimately, even if it's, I think we need to step back, because we're also talking about foreign policy here. We need to step back and ask ourselves, what happens if Trump wins? What happens if Biden wins? In terms of the deepening and the strengthening of a democratic system globally, something we took for granted. Back in the times of the, I think the early 1980s, when we were talking of the democratization process in Nigeria and across Africa for that matter, it was almost a given that all of us knew what it meant to do, to become a democratic system. If you had elections, you had a certain number of things in place, a legislature in place and things like that, immediately we assumed that we had become a democracy. But what we are seeing now is that democracy itself as a concept, as an idea, and as a practice is being contested for. And that in every country around the world, that idea cannot be assumed. You cannot just assume that that idea is an idea that is taken in a certain form. The people of that country need to rise up and engage with that space and make it what it is. And that's what this whole election message is putting forward. And just going back to the two comments I made earlier on what do we expect if it is Biden and if it is Donald. I guess in my own initial analysis, I would say that one of the first big things that all of us in the world will have to be thinking about if it is Donald is what does democracy mean going forward? Is democracy, like we say in Nigeria, just that process that allows somebody to gain power? Or is it much more than that process that allows people to gain power? If we see a Biden victory, I am sure we're going to increasingly see a situation where we're going to try and again ask the question, are we returning to democracy as we used to know it? Or are we asking that given what has happened, democracy has to reinvigorate, re-energize, or recreate or rebirth? We see a rebirth of the democratic ideal as what we used to understand it. Obviously, around the world, there is a lot of questions around the question of the collapse of democracies and the nature and content of democracy itself. And this whole election has brought that back into the fore. And I hope that going forward, I mean, it's not a question of going forward. The world is going to have to debate what it means to have a democratic system and whose ideas of democracy and what ideas of democracy should endure even going forward. So that would be my take at this point.
You have another take, Ambassador Okoyo, on the basis of some of the issues you have just raised. I was going to leave this until the middle of the conversation, but I might as well pop it up now. Two leading candidates, incumbent Donald Trump with his running mate, that's Vice President Mike Pence. And then you have former Vice President Joe Biden and his running mate, who is a woman. I don't want to make this a sexist conversation, but in the event that Joe Biden wins, this will be the first time that America, in over 200 years, will have a woman who, as the saying goes, is a heartbeat away from the presidency. And yet, elsewhere around the world, you've had women leaders who are either prime ministers or presidents, even right now. What, in your opinion, has been that factor in American democracy that had made it often challenging for a woman to become either a vice president? Geraldine Ferraro tried that in 1984, didn't quite succeed. McCain, Senator McCain had a female running mate. He didn't quite succeed. Hillary Clinton tried to be president 4 years ago. She didn't quite succeed. If Joe Biden wins and Senator Harris then becomes the vice president, that will be quite unique. But there are questions to answer as to why it took America so long to have a woman in the White House.
Great question, great question. I want to say that there is quite a lot of discussion going on around who Americans really are. Even with the results we are beginning to see, the language of what the polls had projected. The polls had projected a certain kind of America, but what we are seeing in reality is a very different America from what the projection has had come across as. And the question people are asking ourselves are, how come a Trump, who was said to have very poor records on all of the things that mattered most to the Americans, is the one who is almost at the point of winning this election and competing very closely with Donald Trump. What am I getting at? I'm getting at an America that looks extremely progressive on the one hand, but underlying that progress are a lot of other contentions, as we have seen with racism, as we have seen with what we call toxic masculinity. In America, you see guys who pick up a gun and start shooting anyhow. Cultures which are very toxic. It's not this is not a conversation against men. It's a conversation against a certain mindset of entitlement of being an American white male, which has actually driven the mainstream conversations around power in America. If you look at certain belts of that country, it is still very deeply conservative, controlled by a certain kind of people who came from a certain kind of background. They call them the low white something. That demographic is there. These are people who hold the sort of ethos of the American system. It is not a very progressive system as you would expect. America looks very progressive on the surface, but underlying it are layers and layers of, as we have seen with the case of George Floyd and all that came out of that with the Black Lives Matter, that there are institutional barriers in America that are deeply seated and deeply this. Then there's the very strong religious lobby. And that religious lobby is still very, very conservative. It hasn't quite loosened its grip on society itself. So these are tensions underlying the American society, which is not unique to America. We have it hugely here in Nigeria. We have very strong women who could be president any day in Nigeria, governors and anything. But at the same time, we have a very conservative underlying culture that presumes that that is not something to be expected. So it is that society that we're looking at. And this whole thing, which is happening between Trump and even Biden, is beginning to even inform. I mean, there's a whole discussion going on now. Who really are these Americans? Who are we really at the end of the day? And that's the conversation that we're having. Other countries have done more in terms of taking this question of gender equality and gender equity right to the bottom of their society. But America is very far from there.
Well, Ambassador Usman Saki, you listen to what your sister ambassador said, and of course you spent quite some time in the U.S., more particularly in New York, where you were deputy PAM rep to the United Nations. Tell us, what's your response to this whole issue of apparent gender inequality with regard to the highest office in the land, namely either the president or the deputy president or the vice president?
Well, I could remember in 2016, one of the reports that I sent, my analysis of the two contenders at that time, was that I clearly said that Hillary Clinton was not going to win, that the next president in 2016 would be Donald Trump, based on the analysis of the the demographics, the social perception of Americans at that time, the evolution of the economy, and also the view that the white population mostly at that time was losing out, and they need to regroup, recover around a figure that they identify with, and also who could now raise their status and standard in the country. And one of the reasons I gave was that America at that time was not ready for a woman, a female president, because of the conservative nature of the American people, particularly the rural areas, where a lot of the votes, the population was at that time. And even today, the rural areas count a lot in American elections. The industrial areas, you will be surprised, is dominated by male population in America. So the labor force, both in the urban areas, the industrial areas, and the agricultural areas are predominantly male-dominated. And the American establishment itself is male-dominated. So for a woman to make that breakthrough to the apex office is considered something unthinkable. And even today, it is very difficult for both parties, the machinery of the two parties, to produce a woman as a presidential candidate. So having Kamala Harris as a vice presidential candidate and a presumptive vice president is something revolutionary by American standards. And it should be welcome, by the way, but there will be a lot of psychological and cultural resistance to the point whereby Americans will now bring forth a female candidate as a president in her own right to be elected by the whole country to become president of the United States. So those cultural barriers, psychological barriers, and even tendency towards consideration of the place of a woman in America, as my colleague Ambassador Toyo explained, is still there. So this religious conservatism, cultural affinities that have lingered on for a long time, surprisingly, in a developed industrial country, are still barriers, that pose some obstacles towards a woman becoming a president. But it's not impossible. Times are changing, situations are changing, circumstances are evolving, and perhaps with Kamala Harris as vice president, we may ultimately find ourselves looking at America from outside, that the society will now accommodate a woman, in her own right, not as an appendage of another man, but in her own right to stand up and be counted and be voted for to become president in the United States. So it's an evolution that should not be expected to happen radically or dramatically, but it will take some time.
What is that? Does that really explain, Ambassador Sariki, does it really explain, the resistance and then the holding, the coming together of the conservatives as these results have been announced? That some are protesting, some are saying this, going for Trump, really?
Well, this election, surprisingly, is like a referendum on Trump and Trumpism. Not really like a popular election about picking a candidate to really rule the country. But are you with Trump or are you tired of Trump? But the surprising and sad thing is that Americans have not repudiated Trump and Trumpism. Demonstrably, explicitly, clearly, they did not. Trump got more votes this year than in 2016. Trump got more support from Latinos and African Americans this year than in 2016. Trump extended his lead or his base beyond his traditional base of the conservative, religious base, evangelical base to other areas like the working class and others in urban areas and rural areas. So Americans did not repudiate Trumpism. They did not repudiate Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, they reaffirmed their attachment to Trumpism, to what he stood for, and the continuation of the Trump phenomena in America. And the Conservative Party, the Republican Party, saw itself as a minority party that is under siege. It managed to control, for the last 6 years, the Senate, in the Congress, the Senate. And thereby, in that process, it became an obstacle for the Democratic president at that time, Barack Obama, to really carry out some reforms. And at the same time, it went on to support willy-nilly all the programs that Donald Trump in the last 4 years wanted to carry out, including the last-minute unorthodox nomination and appointment of a Supreme Court judge, which should have been left to take place after the elections, after the November 9, declaration of results and other things. But they went ahead, the Senate, to confirm the nomination. So the polarization that I referred to earlier is very deep in the political structure of America. So this idea of we are under siege by the white Republican Party helped to consolidate them, and Trump actually vented their fears and reaffirmed, gave them reassurance that with him there, their interests are protected on immigration, on gun control, on tax cut for big corporations, on stimulating the economy, and even on internal security by presenting a tough guy attitude to security, and also by telling people that, look, with me, you can go out and enjoy your lives as usual. There will be no lockdowns because of COVID. But with Biden, you are going to be locked up at home. And to Americans, that is like imprisonment if you tell them that they should stay at home. Small businesses will suffer, and that is the base of the American economy. That is the basis of American employment. And that is the basis of household incomes. Every 2 weeks, they get their check from restaurants, from bars, from small businesses. So by stoking the fear, particularly of the white constituencies, Donald Trump held on tooth and nail to his position, to his constituency, and to create a new framework, paradigm, or dynamic in American politics, whereby his concept of politics will matter for the foreseeable future, whether he's there or not. So that is something very radical, something dramatic, and something that we have to take into account.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sarki. Let's return to Kasim. who is still with us via Zoom from Investing in Illinois. Kasim, of course, you listen to the two other guys, the two ambassadors who are here with us, Ambassador Sarki and Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo. Two of the issues that they have raised relate to what this election is all about, a referendum on Trumpism and the numbers that we have seen. Trump performing much better in 2020 in terms of absolute numbers of votes than he did in 2016, as well as the spread that he has also got from various communities, particularly just on the face of it, the minority populations, African Americans and Latinos in some states. Now, Ambassador Toyo says that, look, there are conversations going around for us to fully understand the dynamics of American democracy and what lessons to learn from all of this. Some persons had said earlier that the reason why Trump is so popular is that he voices those concerns that a good number in his support base are unable to voice out. Has this played out in his favor? And if so, considering also the polarization that has been reported in that society, is this going to be a happy ending in the event that Trump loses, or are we going to see full-blown manifestation of the threats of disturbance?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the question and for the comments of the two ambassadors. Actually, I think it's very important for us to understand why people support Trump. The supporters of Trump, they are not monolithic or homogeneous. People actually support Trump for different reasons. There are those who support Trump because of his ideology of populism and the all subtle supports that he gives to the white supremacist movement. There are those who support Trump for that reason. There are those who support Trump who dislike or show apathy to the ideology of Trump, but they support him because of his economic policy. Because ever since Trump came into power, he has actually tried to focus on employment for Americans and providing more jobs for Americans with the whole concept of American First. So there are those who actually support Trump for that basis. There are those who support Trump because they feel that he's actually going to protect their conservative religious beliefs, especially on the issues of gender and sexual rights, or on the issue of gun control, like the ambassador said, on the issue of abortion, and some other issues that are so daring and appealing to the evangelicals and the religious conservatives within America. So there are different reasons why people support Trump. And the support is not just even within America. Globally, we've also seen people in Nigeria who have actually held rally in support of Trump. And the reason that some of them support Trump is because they actually believe that Trump is they actually see him as a defender, quote unquote, of religious beliefs in the face of a new world order. So there are people, for example, in Nigeria who actually held rally in support of Trump on this basis. There are those who support Trump because of his foreign policy on Israel. So there are different reasons why people support Trump. And all of these reasons are intersectional. And you might find a person who totally dislike and show apathy to Trump's white supremacist tendency, but who believe that Trump's economic policy is better than Biden. And because of that, that person will go ahead and support Trump. But it's also very important for us to understand that there are people. The context of 2016 election is quite different from the context of 2020 election. So when people say, for example, that Trump actually got more support in 2020 election, I think it's important for us to actually contextualize that particular assertion. And the reason for that is, in 2016, the content, the way Trump's the number in 2016, the turnout of voters is quite different from what we're seeing in 2020. And in 2016, some of the key states that Trump actually won in 2020, Trump actually lost those key states. States like Michigan, states like Arizona. These are key states that actually has Republican. They are red state. They're considered red state. But Trump actually lost those states. In 2020, we've also seen Republican figures, people within the Republican Party, who came out to overtly denounce Trump and support Biden. A very good example is the person of Cindy McCain. So Cindy McCain is the wife of John McCain, the late Arizona senator. And ever since Trump came into power, he has been vilifying John McCain. He has been saying artful rhetoric against John McCain. And Cindy McCain took it upon herself, despite the fact that she's Republican, she came out and actually denounced Trump and then voiced the support for Biden. So we've had people who were Trump supporters in 2016, but today they've actually left that camp. Even though they are Republican, they left the camp and actually came forward to support Biden. So I think Trump is actually like a liability for the Republican Party. Is a liability for the Republican Party, but it's also someone who accrues support for the Republican Party, depending on how we actually view it. For example, there are those who actually look at Trump and they look at his foreign policy. They say, well, Trump has actually tried to establish friendly relation with North Korea. He has tried to reduce the tension around nuclear around nuclear agreements with North Korea. Trump has also, according to some people, made efforts to create a form of rapprochement and amiable foreign policy among the Arab countries and Israel. So in recent time, we've seen countries like UAE, we've seen Sudan, we've seen UAE, we've seen Bahrain, and some of the Arab countries, they've actually they've denounced their hostile foreign policy posture to Israel on the basis of Trump's relation. So there are those who actually look at Trump and say, well, Trump is not sponsoring or invading or intervening in other people's countries' affairs like the way that other past presidents do. I mean, like Obama and even like Obama and even Bush. So people look at Trump, and some people support him on that base. But the support and opposition of Trump has dwindled. It has dwindled in both ways on the ground. And I think to wrap this up, I think it's also very important to, although the American media might actually project a form of a progressive posture, what is happening on the ground is completely not necessarily conforming with that progressive posture that America is showing to the world. So, for example, for most people who watch CNN, MSNBC, what they see is a liberal America. But on the ground, the old liberalism is actually is sectionalized, is in certain constituency, and Trump has actually been able to hold his own constituency. And I think, lastly, he has also preyed on the fears of America. The issue of immigration has been a big issue for most Americans. I mean, and this is not just for Americans. We've seen this globally. We've seen this in South Africa with the xenophobic attacks from South Africans to other Africans. People feel that citizens globally are feeling that they need to implement more nationalist policy and nationalist posture that would give priority to their own citizens first before any other citizens of the world. So this issue of immigration has also been a big issue for Trump, because Trump has insisted that Americans have to be placed first. He has vehemently came out to declare war. I mean, he actually called it war against terrorism, but is more or less hostility towards Muslims. We've seen this with the Muslim travel ban that he actually instituted. So he's preying on this fear, fear of immigration. We've seen this even with the whole building of wall between Mexico and America. So all of this type of policy that Trump is implementing is actually making people to drift towards him. But it's the same issue that is actually making people to drift away from him, because those who oppose him actually are saying that we need to spread love in place of fear, that it's important to spread hope in place of this enemy construct that Trump has actually built in the minds of the American public. So it's important to be nuanced actually when we are speaking about why people support or why people oppose Trump.
Well, thank you very much, Abdul Basit. You made some valid points there. But let me talk to Ambassador Toyo there and get your perspective, Ambassador, on this issue raised by Ambassador Serkin, of course, Abdul Basit. There are vital electoral blocks in the United States. Black Americans is one block, of course. The Hispanic is another good block too. And when you look at what is really happening in terms of support for Donald Trump, the George Floyd issue is still very fresh in the minds of everybody, especially Americans. He's a black man. The running mate of Biden is also a known personality coming from the Hispanic side. But it so seems as Trump has, doubled or rather increased his support among these two blocs compared to 2016. In 2016, he was able to make it about 28% among the Hispanics, and now it's about maybe 36%. And when you come down to the black Americans, he doubled it almost with about 12%. And these are really something to imagine than being real, given where the running mate for Biden is coming from, and given the Black Matter Life, matters is. How do you see this? I mean, what's really happening? What's your perspective on this?
Thank you very much. I think Kazim tried to give us some indirection that we must be a lot more nuanced about this, and that there is no monolithic group that is voting on Trump on the basis of just one interest. I think what people tend to do in a voting situation like the one we've seen in America is to ask themselves which situation is best for me, which situation favors me best. First and foremost, as we have said this morning, this election has seen the largest turnout I hear for America. At the time I was looking at it, which is to go into an election. So in terms of just the numbers, just the interest, just the heightening of this whole election, suggests to me that the turnout itself has something to do. So if many more Black Americans were turning out who are Republican, many more Hispanic who are are turning out, it definitely will have an impact on the numbers. But I think in terms of the ratio itself, it also speaks to what I think Kazim had said. What is the underlying currency? For example, the black voters who probably went in the direction, probably I say, there is also the tension between the African-American blacks and the blacks who are like Kazim, migrants into America. There are tensions of question of who are these guys? Who is a Kazim who is coming to take over the job? I have been here, I went through slavery. I know the pains and agonies I've been through. And you just come straight into my country and you're getting the choicest of jobs and so on and so forth. So there are other underlying factors, like we say. And we have already touched the fact that America is not as open and as liberal as it looks on the television and as we see in the movies and all of that. It's still very much a society with its own conservatisms. And I use conservatisms because it's also a country of many migrants. And each migrant wave of migration come into that country maintaining a certain level of who they are, their original identity, and in trying to protect those different identities and keep the spaces for those different identities to find their own relevance in the American dream, they have also nurtured some level of concern. So Nigerians go into that space and they are still Nigerians, even though they're American Nigerians. They are keeping their own little identities around that, and that helps to differentiate where they tend to go or where they do not go. So yes, even the Republican Party itself is asking the same question. Are we a party of Trump or are we a party of the Republicans? There are many questions that this experience is going to touch and probably explain going forward. I'm happy to say that the point Ambassador Serki makes on this being a referendum on Trumpism as different from Trump himself, Trumpism is an ideology in itself, is a great one which will engage the minds of people going into the future. And I think Trumpism also represents a phenomenon in many parts of the world. It's not just something that we must end up with America. We must also ask, where are we seeing this rabid populism taking? I mean, it has its different manifestations. And I think maybe in the next couple of editions, we should be asking ourselves, what does this mean for Nigeria itself? Is Nigeria also experiencing any of these tendencies where there is a clash and a contestation between the old order and the new order? And what does the old and the new order meeting and contesting for spaces, which is what we are beginning to see with some of the NSAS movement and protests? How do we begin to see those changes and those tensions? So these are crossroads in the histories of different countries, and countries must rise. I think the fear-mongering is there, but given the strength of the state, American state, I'm sure they'll be able to manage whatever fallouts we see from this election and carry it forward. The challenge is for many other countries like ours, where when these tensions come, our capacity to manage the fallout is much less established than it is in maybe a country like America. So in summary, I think we're going to see many more tendencies, and the explanations going into the future will be interesting to look at and listen to.
Oh, well, many thanks, Ambassador Toyo there. We thank you so much for these insights. I would wish Ambassador Serki to comment on this, but we'll now take a break. When we come back, we want you to really comment on this a bit briefly, these electoral blocks and how Trump is making his way in spite of the odds against that. We'll now take a break. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and it's reaching you from the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA, the largest TV network in Africa. Stay with us. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're reaching you from the NTA. Nigerians have spoken to on this issue, on this program still. There are tools that have come in. But before we take the tweets, I would want Ambassador Serki to respond to this. I'm still, very much at ease with this kind of arithmetic, if I may say so. What's your take on this, given the electoral blocks and how Trump is making inroads into them, in spite of, the negatives against him in this regard?
Yes, thank you very much. Like my brother Abdul Basit said, we should not look at groups as monolithic, blocks with only unidirectional way of going in America. We are speaking about two constituencies now, the Latino constituency and the African American. Well, the Latinos, are beginning to say, look, we too, we are white people. We should not be typecast into a mold that we're separate people. We are also of European extraction. We are from Spain or background, although there are a lot of them are mixed with indigenous races, but they see themselves as white people. The same level with the Anglo-Saxons, the Germans, the people who came from Northern Europe and other things to be Americans. So they are saying, don't create something out of us that we are not. We are Americans and we want to be Americans. That is first consideration. Secondly, a lot of them, like those in Florida, ran away from what they perceived as socialist or communist regimes. And to find freedom in America, to find opportunities in America. So when Trump tells them that Joe Biden will bring socialism into the country, they believed him, and they are now looking at taking a periscopic view of what is happening in Venezuela, in Bolivia, in Peru, other countries in Latin America, in Cuba, and say, look, we don't want to go to those situations. We want to be Americans. We want to enjoy the prosperity that America gives. So he stoked their fears and their sentiments, and he said, look, despite my stand on immigration, you are also part of the American project that we are trying to build. And a lot of them bought in to this message. The other thing, of course, is the Latinos also are tired of seeing themselves cast as breeding ground of gang members, criminals and gangsters. And they want to reform themselves, their communities, their image as people who are responsible, respectable, who will contribute to the building of America. So I think that gave them the opportunity to spread their influence and also their opportunities, whether with the Republicans or Democrats. Now, coming to the African Americans, Trump, in his usually bombastic, if you like, manner or immoderate manner, he said, look, I am the president who did more than any other president since the time of Lincoln. In fact, even Lincoln did not do what I did for you African Americans. I gave you opportunities. I gave you jobs. I opened up the economy. So therefore, you must be grateful to me. I am the one who gave you the opportunity to have jobs, to have income, to have houses, to have cars. You know, these are what the average African American, unfortunately, thinks about to move up the social ladder. And he told them, Biden and the Democratic Party are taking you for granted. For decades, they have taken you for granted as their natural constituency. They just come to you every 4 years to vote for them, but they don't do anything for you. And he told them, he asked, what did Obama do for you? So this kind of question, reflective instinct, came to the fore in their consideration. And you will be surprised to see a group of African Americans standing outside the White House, demonstrating or gathering to support Trump, to be led by African Americans. And that gave a powerful impression that the African American constituency is no longer a monolithic constituency that stands through thick and thin, come rain or come shine, with the Democratic Party. And one of the legacies of Trump is actually to make very solid inroad into those two constituencies to broaden his base.
Ambassador Sarkis, thank you very much. Nadabo, along the line of the analysis by Ambassador Sarkis, there's some of the numbers that have come out from the Latino communities in Florida and Texas. Those numbers, that of course Trump has won Texas, he's also won Florida. There's a huge electoral college votes. That these were states heavily impacted by fatalities arising from coronavirus. And the coronavirus issue, the poor management of it alleged by a number of opposing voices to Donald Trump, was one of the key issues on which former Vice President Joe Biden campaigned. So Texans saying that, look, in spite of that, we're going for Trump. The Floridians are also saying, we're also going for Trump. And you have seen that in the governor of Florida, who also has no mask policy. Everybody's going about and Trump is saying, look, don't try to be politically correct by wearing a mask. But your analysis, of course, is spot on, and we appreciate that. Now, Dabo, let's take some of the tweets that we have already.
Okay, let's start with Adamu Sheshi Kacha, who says, why do we talk much about this election as if they care about us? For me, let's join hands together to reform our electoral act and make our election better than that of the years. May God bless Nigeria and Nigerians.
Now, Festus Akimboye, the way Trump is attacking the electoral process, accusing his opponents of stealing votes, accusing the election authorities of cheating and threatening to sue his way to victory, all go to show that the U.S. democracy is not different from countries where democracy is less established.
Well, Usman Banu Kantu says Americans have virtually spoken. Trump's unguarded utterances is the characteristics of drone person. Quite a number of Americans have since voted for the past 1 month, leaving him with the so-called Proud Boys. Therefore, he should be magnanimous in accepting defeat.
Chris Simeon, I knew the Democrats would not take it easy with Trump and his Republicans in the 2020 election. Well, if he thinks there's election fraud, he can approach the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, congrats to whoever is going to emerge winner.
Mike Kenyako says, but that notwithstanding, there was massive turnout of electorate to exercise the franchise. I was fascinated by absentee mailing and early voting, which I will graciously plead for on INEC to adopt in 2023 general elections. This will enhance greater participation.
Let's take Badamasi Adamo. It says the so-called mother of democracy is feeding aged candidates and the election is marred by issues. Meanwhile, there's quite a difference between what the U.S. preaches and what it does in practice.
Oladimeji Morufu says, to win an election, one must learn how to concede defeat. Wishing the winner best of luck ahead of declaration.
Festus Akimboyewa again. If there's anything Nigerians can learn from the U.S. election is the enthusiasm and large voter turnout.
And Low Alpha, also our regular commentator here, says, as an astute and successful businessman, President Trump has all it takes to manage his country's huge economy, but his poor handling of coronavirus protocols may be his undoing.
Steve Bond, that's Stephen. Voting is easy. That's the same in the U.S. because they have many voting options by mail or in person. It's time for electoral reforms here in Nigeria.
Danladi Ndayabo comments that videos from the United States depicting armed to teach Trump supporters boasting that they have enough weapons in their arsenal to start an armed conflict if Trump loses is a letdown by a country that calls itself the beacon of democracy.
Ahmed Mohammed, for me, the Electoral College vote is a big fraud. It doesn't make sense at all. But you do not explain why you think it's a big fraud and why it doesn't make sense.
Al-Sune, on his part, says, I think we should look into the electoral process of the United States and try to do the same here in our country.
Chris Simeon says Nigerian politicians should learn from the U.S. presidential election. In a short period of time, election results will be announced and the winner declared. What thrills me in the election is the use of electronic voting. It's minimizing rigging, manipulation, and speeding up the entire voting process.
And finally, a very short one here from Nandom Web. Let's look and learn, he says. God bless Nigeria.
All right, so that's some of the tweets that we want to take in the meantime. We get impressed, but Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, let's look at some lessons that we can possibly draw from the U.S. electoral system. It's a bit more complicated than what we have here in Nigeria. There is no equivalent of INEC in the U.S., for instance. States are the ones that conduct their elections. States have different rules. Some persons might say, well that's the ultimate federalism, if you like, confederalism, as the saying goes. So the electoral system just might be a little bit tricky to say you want to imitate because ultimately for the presidential election it leads to an electoral college. But there's one other point. If you want to speak on that, that would be fine. But there's one other point I want us to address because you were also a member of the House of Representatives. In the event that Joe Biden wins the election, now the outcome of the races for the House of Reps and the U.S. Senate, those outcomes have not been particularly favorable to the Democratic Party. And we have seen over the years how a president who is from a different party and the Senate or one of the chambers of the U.S. Congress controlled by another party can just be a stumbling block to the realization of the programs and policies of that particular administration. Even though the president is said to be the most powerful person, he can use a number of mechanisms So even if Joe Biden were to be winner this time, from what we are seeing in terms of the returns for the Senate, he's most likely going to face very strong headwinds in Congress, plus the fact that there is also now a conservative-loaded U.S. Supreme Court, 6-3. What does this tell us about, again, American democracy? If you're looking at democracy, the concept of three arms of government, independence and interdependence, does this clarify our understanding of American democracy, or does it compound it?
Well, thank you. Like I said, every experience of democracy for every country is very different, extremely different. I would probably disagree a bit that Nigeria is any less complicated. I think Nigeria is equally as complicated as America is, and the contentions and the conflicts we see underlying every democracy. Let me start by saying democracy by its very nature is conflictual, is very conflictual. We do not seem to think about two people holding on to power at different levels and each of them trying to get. That very idea that 2, 3, or 4 people will be fighting to get that and struggling to get that power, it's in itself embedded in conflict. So democracy itself is very conflictual. In America, because of the amount of money, the size of its media, the size of its public engagement with the citizens, that has been reached to a very high level. Now, back to the point you make about the relationship between this new government, when it emerges, and the National Assembly or the Congress, in the case of America, as well as its relationship with the third arm of government, which is the judiciary, are very interesting dimensions. And whatever we say here is just by way of extrapolation, because we really do not have the full internal dynamics. I think what I read this morning is that the Republican Party is going to hold on to the Senate. I hope I'm right there. I don't know, but that's what I'm reading. In addition, if they do, it means that we probably will see what already is on ground, where the Senate is Republican and the House of Representatives is Democratic, which means even by the very nature of that arrangement, it provides a different whole context for the way things are done within the National Assembly itself, or the Congress itself. Oh. But let me also draw attention that I think.
All right, Ambassador Toyo, sorry, it looks like there's some audio glitch there with your connection. I want Ambassador Sarki, you'll listen to that question. Just, let's get your response, please.
Okay, good. Well, I think, the first thing, if Vice President, Biden comes into the White House, the first thing I think he will do is to reach out to the Congress, which will, I think the Senate will be dominated still by the Republicans. He cannot pass his new Green Deal, for instance, for America, where he hopes to spend about $1 trillion to promote clean energy. He cannot pass any initiative on global climate change within the matrix of the political dynamics in America. And he cannot negotiate new trade deals or renegotiate what Donald Trump has put in place. His nuclear policy and negotiations will also be obstructed by the Congress. So a lot of obstacles will be placed deliberately before him. What he could do first is to restructure or re-energize the Democratic Party, to bring together the supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders, for instance, Hillary Clinton and others, to create a new dynamic in the Democratic Party, particularly to promote younger activists and also candidates in the party, and to spread the relevance of the Democratic Party in America. And his economic policy is going to be very, very difficult to pass through Congress because of the tax increases in tax that he would like to do for big corporations. So he will find his work cut out for him. So he has to reach out to key Republicans, create bipartisan dynamics in the government in terms of his domestic policy, economy, energy especially, and also on immigration, because immigration, whether Americans like it or not, will be a topic for discussion for a long time to come. And also internal security, policing of America, interracial relationship. These are really very difficult emotional topics that he has to deal with, and he has to reach out to bipartisan constituency. In foreign policy, he said he is going to review what Donald Trump has done in terms of relationship with Israel, relationship with Iran, relationship with China, relationship with North Korea, with Russia, and also a new approach to NATO and the European Union. So all these things are really heavy and hefty issues that he has to consolidate his base, establish channels of communication and relationship with Congress before he could get this initiative passed.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ambassador Usman Sarki, former Deputy Representative of Nigeria to the United Nations and currently Director Staff, National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, NIPS Kurujas. We thank you so much for being
Thank you.
here
It was a great pleasure. Great pleasure. Thank you.
We must also thank Ambassador Nkoye Toyo, former Nigerian ambassador to Ethiopia and former member House of Representatives. We thank you for your time and insights, Ambassador. Abdul Basit Kasim, a PhD candidate at Rice University and a visiting doctoral fellow of Northwestern University, Illinois, Evanston, USA. Your insights have been very helpful. We thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We shall now take a bit of sports before we round up, and it's Good Morning Nigeria. Talking about the U.S. elections is inconclusive. We shall keep talking about that in days to come. Let's turn to sports.
Super Eagles captain Ahmed Musa is currently being monitored by Turkish Super League giants Galatasaray, who are interested in signing on the forward. Reports from Turkey monitored on Photomac reveal that Galatasaray are looking to land Musa with a view to strengthening their left wing. It was further revealed that the Lions are already in contact with Musa's agent towards working out a possible agreement. Musa becomes a free agent after quitting Saudi Arabia club Al Nassr, where his contract was mutually terminated recently. The 28-year-old had previously starred for VVV Venlo in the Dutch Eredivisie, CSKA Moscow in the Russian Premier League, and Leicester City in the English Premier League before his sojourn in Saudi Arabia. The former Kano Pillars forward made 55 appearances in all competitions for Al Nassr, scoring 11 goals and recording 14 assists during his spell at the club. Meanwhile, Barcelona presidential candidate Joan Laporta is reportedly keen to lure Jurgen Klopp to Camp Nou if he assumes control of the club. Klopp has enjoyed remarkable success at Liverpool and has won the Premier League as well as the UEFA Champions League with the club. The German is under contract at the club until 2024. Barcelona recently appointed Ronald Koeman as Quique Setien's successor, but the former Netherlands manager is struggling for results in the league as Barca look to usurp Real Madrid as La Liga champions. However, the former Borussia Dortmund boss is extremely unlikely to leave the Anfield dugout without good reason, with Klopp previously admitting that he intends to take a break and potentially retire from management when his Liverpool deal runs out in 4 years' time.
All right, so that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. As always, we appreciate your being with us. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do take care of yourself and be fair to each other. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Yusuf Nadabu. Someone, we thank you so much for being part of this package this morning. Hope you come along with us tomorrow for another one. Bye-bye.